He was always, that mysterious figure that we want more of but never want to encounter. He was absolute anonymity, and then we found out his story. It was even more ambiguous than, before. He was ancient, and to the D&D player, this is like meeting Eric Clapton for a guitarist, Beethoven for a pianist. This guy was a legacy in our world. He was a stitch in time that if you got to interact with, that was a big deal. If you were in the same room with this guy and lived, you need no other story.
Probably my favorite story that you ever came up with for the world is the ever-presence of the Nameless One. His force is felt throughout the world anytime, particularly when you sit down as the dungeon master. So I was wondering if you could tell me at least one more time, please, his story.
Yeah. I could even tell you where I came up with it from. Years ago, and I was discussing with a friend at the time, an acquaintance, and he was giving me some pointers. He gave me a module that he had. It was Castle Greyhawk, and he said, run that. That's an excellent adventure, one of the best ever written. I wanted to do my own world. I wanted to write my own adventures, but I didn't see any reason why I couldn't take pieces of what someone else wrote. In Castle Greyhawk, there's an artifact. It's down at the bottom of the Tower of Power. And it was an orb. But the orb simply, if you touched it, would house your soul. And then you could touch it later, and then you get your soul back. And if you touched it, and your soul went in it, and then someone else touched it, your souls would flip-flop. Or one would be in the orb, and now your soul will be in that guy. If I found that in real life, what would I do with it? What could I do with it? What could I accomplish? Would I use it for evil, for good? And I thought about, what if a paladin had that, and a paladin used it for longevity, for eternal life, to not die? In Fiend Folio, in the original Dungeons and Dragons books, and Fiend Folio had a Death Knight in there, and it said there was only 12 of them. And I said, well, I know one. He was a paladin, and he found that orb, and he did just that. And he touched it, and he figured out how it worked. And now he's still alive, and it's like 2,000 years later, and he uses that orb. He makes people touch that orb to put his soul into their shell, and then eradicates their soul. And now he's not just a fallen paladin, he's a Death Knight. And so why did he do that? What was it greed? Was it power? So, well, maybe it was a noble idea, or a noble reason, or at least in his mind. He thought he was doing it for a good reason, but it was actually a selfish reason, because his buddy, his friend, he went into the room 1,000 years wide. Then he went into the room 1,000 years wide for a reason, because inside the room is 1,000 years wide, is they found out where all evil in the world was coming from. All evil in the world was coming from this one room, but it was 1,000 years wide. And to close that portal, that place where all that evil was coming from, you would have to go across that room and get to the other side and close it, physically close it. And who could do that? How do you get over there? How do you live that long? And it was impossible to do. And Jack's buddy was a wizard, and he knew how to get across. And through the rites of of becoming a shade. He would become an undead, and he could go across. Even though these two men were good, he was doing it for the better good of everyone. So he's sacrificing himself. You know, he's taking the shot. He's fallen to evil, but not in temptation and greedy reasons, but to traverse the room 1,000 years wide, close the portal. And if he was successful, he should be able to come out again. And then he went in, you know, he took transformation. He went in, and inside the room was nothing but candelabra. And as he's walking, and it didn't matter where he went, there's just candelabra everywhere. And he walks and he walks, and there's candelabra. He turns around to leave, go out the door, it's not there. It doesn't matter which way he goes or what he does, it's just an eternity, on and on. Eventually, 1,000 years later, he makes it to the other side, at which point he's completely insane. He's lost his mind. But he still remembers his purpose. He remembers his purpose to close the source of all evil in the world. He was guarded by a dragon. He slayed the dragon, and he couldn't do it on his own. He enlisted the aid of Chiron that he befriended in past adventures. He slayed the dragon. And then the whole room just crumbles around him, and he's just standing in a room, a room like this one, 20 by 20, 30 by 30, whatever. Small in comparison to 1,000 years wide, and it only just shattered what was left of his psyche. But upon exiting, he found his buddy Jack. Jack was still there. Jack was waiting for him. How did Jack live? Jack used the orb that they had found. Jack used that orb to wait for his friend, thereby becoming a Death Knight. So we know Jack's name. That the Nameless One is the wizard. No one knows his name, and he doesn't know his name. He lost that when he lost his mind, when he lost his psyche. Yeah, they say that the only one that knows his name is Jack, and Jack's never telling no one. So he's the Nameless One.